Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this narration of the web series The Nature of Predators. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 44. Memory Transcription Subject, Captain Calsum, Krakotl Alliance Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 9th, 2136. As soon as we departed Krakotl space, it became evident that the humans had been tracking our movements. The predators were lurking in the shadows along our starry route. 2 ambushes were sprung on the fleet during the first day of travel. The primates knew that we were coming, and that was enough to unsettle the crew. But the humans were afraid. From what I could tell, their attack seemed devoted to stalling and chipping away at our resources. Larger Terran ships had FTL disruptors on their hulls, which could be deployed as soon as we came within range. They would dart in for a missile run while we were dazed, then vanished just as quickly. Why do they flee after a single strike? These techniques seem too cowardly to be born of predators. Nonetheless, I adjusted personnel rotation so that our vessel was combat ready at all times. I allowed myself only a short nap after the second ambush, just to refresh my wits. There was no time for a full night's rest until the enemy resurfaced. Thyon was working overtime as well, compiling data to predict the Terran's next appearance. Our vessel was going to nail the humans next time they tried anything. If their attempts at disrupting our operations were this lousy, they must lack confidence in their combat abilities. This locale seems like the likeliest spot for an ambush. The EM radiation from the system's pulsar makes our senses and targeting wonky, the first officer said, though perhaps I'm mistaken. It would affect their targeting too. My feathers ruffled in disquiet. I suspect the humans' reliance on targeting is less than ours. They have a backup system in their brains. Should we advise the fleet to reroute? If I am correct about the Terran whereabouts, there is less than a minute before they activate the disruptors. Let's not do anything hasty, Thyon. Their ships can outpace us, so we'll just be pushing this off to a later date. We face these predators' pests here, on our terms. The fossil officer swallowed nervously and studied his readout. I couldn't blame the big-eared guy for feeling discomfort about engaging the humans blind. Our instinctual fear wasn't conducive to the off-the-cuff maneuvers and precise calculations under stress. Krakotl could muster aggression, sure, but that desperation wasn't controlled. But Jala wasn't bogged down by chemicals. If I placed her behind the weapon station, she could recalibrate our artillery on a dime. We didn't have to worry about fear or addling her senses. There was a reason I twisted the brass's wing, not to lock her up in the asylum like they wanted to. It was in our best interest to use people like her against the predators. I cleared my throat. Jala, assume control of weapons, switch to manual override, and hit the first ship you see with whatever you like. The female Krakotl shoved the younger officer out of her way and pecked the buttons with giddiness. She didn't need to be told twice. It was rare to see anyone else so thrilled to carry out orders, especially when those involved being flung into combat. My second-in-command wouldn't miss the clues if they were shoved in his face. Captain, answer me honestly, Thyon whispered. Does Jala have predator disease? I lowered my voice. That terminology is ignorant. Predators do feel fear. Jala is an asset that I have under control. She knows I am the only thing stopping her from being thrown into a deep, dark hole. I don't believe for a second that predators feel anything, but she has more in common with them either way. How can we trust her not to side with them? Even people with her condition don't side with people who want to eat them. I've heard that was a way of shortening your lifespan. You don't say. The Falsel transported the projected enemy coordinates onto the sensor grid. By his estimates, the humans were camped within the gas giant's rings. It seemed a suitable position to lie in wait. The planet's gravitational field added further disturbances to sensor readings, and the icy ring particles were indistinguishable from a quiet vessel. That's actually some solid analysis from Thyon. I suppose I'm fortunate the guy the Federation saddled me with is halfway intelligent. The first officer also noted the maximum range of an FTL disruptor. It stood to reason that the humans would wait until the bulk of the fleet were within the pulse's umbrella. I highlighted the blaze zone circumference with my screen, using the approximate location. Now, it was a matter of forging ahead and waiting. Navigations as soon as we hit the edge of the red circle. Disengage warp, I squawked. If we time this right, the humans will think we stunned. Just as they show themselves, we'll be ready to fire. Bryan blinked in surprise. Bold plan. But if we're off by a few seconds, we'll get dazed alongside everyone else. And if we drop in too early, the humans will know that we're onto them. Of course, we don't know they're there for sure. We could just be chasing ghosts. But I'm trusting your work. Thank you, sir. Shouldn't we tip off the fleet, though? Negative. The predators may have breached our comms. Other friendly vessels may have come to similar conclusions, but our role as the Crocodile flagship was to seize the initiative. Defeating a predator necessitated brashness. I don't think even the meticulous humans accounted for just the turning of the tables. They were under the impression that everyone in the Federation was weak, and that might serve as well. The fear plastered across the bridge's crew's faces was apparent. The inexperienced enlisted weren't keen on hurling a multi-billion credit ship into a predator's trap. To be fair, this was the kind of action that earned reprimands from the Alliance Command if it backfired. We had one chance to validate our decisions. My file does say that I take unnecessary risks, and attributes my success to luck. I imagine Tyon read that dossier before boarding. For better or worse, I always asked myself what a predator would do. Trying to predict their moves or understand their thinking was easy. Once it was a habit. This raid was one final job before passing the baton to someone younger. What better way to cap off my career than vanquishing the greatest threat of our time? I fluttered over to the navigation station, ready to intervene if the technician froze. Our dot was almost overlapping the perilous area. Tyon was itching to issue the disengage order, but I didn't want to jump the gun. We couldn't allow the riskiness to inhibit our patience. My breathing hitched as we entered the pulse threshold. A little further. Real space. Now. A head and view of the gas giant materialized on the viewport. The dull orange mass surrounded by a glistening ring was a sight to behold. My talons stiffened as the feeling of being watched sank in. I couldn't see enemy ships, but I could sense their unholy presence. No sign of human activity, Tyon began. Thousands of friendly vessels appeared around us without warning. The Federation fleet was evidently reeling from the effects of the disruptor signal. Lithe Terran ships swarming around the ring and descended on the nearest crocodile vessels with fury. Jala's wings extended to full span as she began firing missiles at will. Several projectiles slammed into the enemy bomber, and it was terminated mid-swoop. More explosives followed close behind, synced with the whirring kinetics that pelted their shields. The humans were pushed back by my crazed crocodile long enough for some friendlies to catch their bearings. Our allies' aim was clearly rattled without sensors, and most plasma beams missed their mark by a long shot. Nonetheless, the Predators determined the mission was a wash. They weren't going to take a chance of a stray hit connecting. There's only a few dozen ships in this ambush anyways. The Terran military didn't lend sufficient support. They're retreating. Don't let them get away, the fossil first officer exclaimed. No Federation ships fire at will, I barked over the comms channel. I don't care if you miss. Hurl everything you've got at their position. Jala was happy to oblige those orders, and dispensed another round of missiles towards the gas giant's cover. That was where the Terrans were trying to vanish for emergency warp. None of our explosives connected with the opponent, but they did pack a punch into the ring itself. Ice fragments were flung out from the epicenter, and some shrapnel found its way into the human armor. The navigations officer maneuvered us to the edge of the ring. The proximity was close enough to get a visual. A few Predator craft were rendered inoperable or ripped apart by debris. Cheers erupted across the bridge as they saw the devastation we unleashed. I tried to mimic pleasure, but gunning humans down just made me feel numb. My eyes lingered on the wreckage of the viewport. Nice work, Jala. We must have taken out a number in the double digits. It's no small part due to your fortitude. Don't mention it. That was fun, she trailed. Just a shame our skirmish was so short. I was expecting more of a scrap. Tyon narrowed his eyes. It's not a shame that our victory was decisive. It makes it more likely that our fight to Earth will continue unimpeded. I tuned out their bickering. My focus was on scanning a motionless Terran vessel via manual input. Ship sensors had been fully automated since before I was born. A close range, though. It should be possible to work through the interference with the operator assistance. The human craft I scrutinized had its hull caved in, which suggested debris impact at high velocity. It was mostly intact, but if life support and propulsions were knocked offline, some part of me itched to know if the pilot was still alive. Future generations would ask about these Earthlings, and nobody could provide an adequate explanation. This was a pristine opportunity to document a sapient predator's mannerisms. "Silence on the bridge, comms, make sure all transmissions are being recorded," I screeched. "I want everyone here to know the enemy, so I'm hailing that venting wreck. Consider it a crash course on predators." Zion gasped. "What? What makes you think that demon will answer?" I tilted my head. There was no guarantee a human would accept our communications attempt, but it was worth a try. Still, seeing its face would make my crew shudder. There was no feasible risk. Its weapons and escape options were severed, and it was smart enough to know that. The outbound hail was sent with a swipe of my talons against the protests of the crew. A tense silence filled the air as our signal was extended to the crippled foe. There was no response for several seconds, which only added to the crew's nerves. Did these people think a predator could teleport on deck through a call? I could almost sense the Terran's bewilderment. It was weighing whether to hear our message. Curiosity must have won out, because a pair of frosty blue eyes appeared on screen. The ferocity of its gaze sent several crewmates ducking for cover. The color looked cold and unnatural. The beast had a laceration across its forehead and was dabbing it with a towel to keep the blood out of its vision. "It's wounded. Maybe it's not thinking straight, so we can pry some intel from it." I couldn't say that looking that it didn't give me the creeps, even after decades of dealing with predators. This creature was more intelligent than anything I eliminated in the wild. There were only a few clumps of hair across its face, which made it look alien and bare. "What do you want? I don't need your mockery, birds," it gurgled. I resisted the urge to avert my gaze, and instead tried to take neutral observations. Beneath that petrifying visage, there were signs that the creature was rattled. The slightest furrow out of its brow suggested fear, and the way its jaw tightened indicated pain. It realized its death was imminent. That knowledge overshadowed its last moments. I raised a wing with a non-committal gesture. "Nobody is mocking you. I just want to talk." "You've got to be shitting me." It leaned closer to the camera, close enough to make out the veins in its eyes. "What makes you think that I want to talk to you? Enlighten me." "A hunch. I figured a pack predator wouldn't want to die alone. If I'm wrong on that, you can end this transmission now." Zion was staring at me like I'd grown a third wing, while Jala was observing the exchange with amusement. I had my reasons for fielding this call in public eye. The crew needed to see affirmation of my theories. After the skeptical reception I'd observed, it would be a critical lapse in understanding to presume that they shared the Oxal's solitary behavioral patterns. The human bared its teeth, then shook its head in disbelief. It placed its chin in its hands, then refocused those horrific eyes on the camera. Frost spiraled from its plump lips, which suggested the cabin temperature was frigid. With only a stingy flaxen mane, I didn't imagine that it would last without environmental regulation for long. "You never answered my question," the beast sighed. "What do you want?" "I want to rescue you from that icebox. Surrender yourself to our custody peacefully, and I'll see that you survive. You can ensure that your culture is remembered." Thanks, but no thanks. How fecking stupid do you think I am? Death is better than what you do to human predators." "You have my word that I'll hold you in fair conditions. You don't want to die. I can see your fear." The predator blinked slowly and hugged its arms together to conserve warmth. It wasn't ready to give up key information now, but if I managed its needs, it might start spilling intelligence. Self-preservation was driving force in every sapient being. The human detached a small cutout from its dashboard and turned it towards the camera. The image was of 3 snarling young predators, with the pilot crouched beside them. Another adult primate had an arm around the offspring and was flashing pearly white fangs. They looked vicious, but happy. "That's my family. I'm afraid, but not of my death," it growled. "I'm afraid that you're going to kill everyone I love. The only thing that'll please you is my whole species purged from existence. And I don't know if even that'll quench your hatred. Please, stop this." The transmission cut out abruptly, and I pushed down a lump of pity in my throat. There was the confirmation that humans care for each other. I hoped that inspired a bit more sympathy from my comrades. The crack-coated government shouldn't hide humanity's redeeming attributes. It was enough to establish them as a major, valid threat. The truth matters, as I thought to myself. We're not going to strip that away from my ship to make ourselves feel better. The Predator only has a few hours before its atmosphere is used up. Orders, sir? Jala asked in an emotionless voice. I lowered my gaze. Terminate it, a quick death, Jala. The human refused my offer, and we can't leave it to be rescued by its brethren. The female crow cattle rolled her eyes, but deployed a missile into the drive column. I watched as the wreckage went up in flame. It was unmerciful to grant the beast a swift end, rather than condemning it to suffocate in the freezing tube. Still, its death didn't bring out any positive emotions. Some of the crew seemed moved by its elimination as well, which meant my strategy was a success. Dion's nostrils flared with exasperation. What were you thinking, Captain? What would you have done if it accepted your offer? I would have stuck it in the brig, like I said, I answered. And no, Zahn wouldn't have gotten within 100 paces of it. We could contain a single, wounded predator, and it was useful. Useful? What did you gain from that little chat? Watch your tone, Exo. This is my ship. Now, you all know the enemy as I do. You can come to terms with the real reasons for this mission. The fossil first officer gritted its teeth. Dion was disturbed by my generous view of predators, but he knew protesting on the bridge was out of line. Perhaps he needed to believe falsehoods to maintain his conviction. All doubts needed to be sorted out before we reached Earth. Assuming the Terran ambushes were resolved, the fleet's next engagement would pummel everything humanity had into oblivion. When we reached our destination, I hoped my crew would be ready to do what was necessary. End of chapter. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, it's difficult to pronounce, Lord Archicol, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.